Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at what we anticipate for 2022 in terms of a few key events related to DFARS rulemaking, the CUI program, and the status of the CMMC program, how that all fits together with Nist requirements, and just sort of what the overall scope looks like from now in February through to about December based off of what we know so far. The thing to really take away from 2022 based off of what we know so far is that policy around CUI and CMMC is going to solidify rapidly compared to last year. And we're going to sort of look at these different swim lanes to identify the key events that we anticipate, as well as sort of the indicators and the ways to pay attention to what's changing over time in order to stay abreast of any relevant changes. So we're going to talk about FAR rulemaking, which is something that hasn't really been a relevant subject for some years now. DFARS rulemaking, which everybody anticipates for the CMMC program. The CMMC program itself, which will have distinct events from rulemaking throughout the year, as well as updates from Nist on the standards that drive the requirements, which are evaluated by CMMC. And then interestingly, some of the developments from other government agencies like DHS and their interface to the CUI program overall. So the first one to anticipate is the actual FAR CUI rule. And the FAR CUI rule is an interesting one because it was originally anticipated in 2016. The overall government-wide CUI program really is made up of three different pieces. It's made up of the CUI program that NARA and ISOO drive for the federal agencies for their own CUI programs. It's made up of NIST 800-171, which is the minimum set of baseline requirements for the protection of that CUI when it is in non-federal organizations. And the part that syncs those two pieces together is what is known as the FAR CUI rule, the actual acquisition regulation that will instruct the contract workforce, what clause to put into contracts, how to identify and mark CUI, a bunch of the things that we've been waiting for throughout the last several years haven't been facilitated because we're missing the FAR CUI rule. We've only had two of the three elements that we need for the overall success of the CUI program, which is why we've sort of been stuck in limbo for so long. So it's been anticipated for quite some time. The thing to remember about the FAR CUI rule is that it is going to greatly facilitate the widespread identification and marking of CUI. Major pain point for most people in terms of CUI is not identified, CUI is not marked. Really, the big constraint on that is the fact that the FAR CUI rule is not out yet. Currently, that's anticipated for sometime. It's supposed to be sometime here towards the end of February. Easily could happen in March. It's in the final stages of legal review in the overall rulemaking process. So as soon as that legal review is complete, they're going to publish that rule. So it's definitely been a long time coming and something to pay attention to, even though it will feel sort of out of the blue because people haven't been talking about it recently. Okay. In terms of DFARS rulemaking, there's going to be a couple of key events. One of them is the DIB-CS rule, the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Program rule. So currently, the DIB-CS program is only available to cleared defense contractors. The majority of the DIB is not made up of cleared defense contractors. So a lot of the threat information, the threat intel sharing, the information sharing, a lot of the tools that are available for cybersecurity as a service, and some of the things that people could really take advantage of are not available to the majority of the DIB. They're stuck in pilot programs or they're gated behind being a cleared defense contractor. This rule is designed to open that constraint up and allow access on a voluntary basis to basically essentially any defense contractor that has to deal with this information who has a need for these services and tools that will be provided by the DoD. So definitely something to pay attention to. The big events on the DFARS rulemaking timeline are the rules around CMMC. There will be two rules that have to be written for CMMC. One will be in 32 Code of Federal Regulations. The other will be in 48 Code of Federal Regulations. So one will be closer to the CUI program itself, the actual programmatic elements of how CUI will run, and the other one will be rulemaking around the clause that actually shows up in the contract that says you have to go get a CMMC certification. You keep hearing the term as of the time of this recording that it's going to take 9 to 24 months. The window that we've sort of heard people talking about, the rumors out there, are sometime between December of 2022 and May of 2023 is when that's probably the sort of middle ground of the ballpark timeline for when these rules will be ready. They don't have to be done in sequence. They're going to be overlapping in terms of how they're developed. So this doesn't have to be that the Cert 32 CFR rule has to be done and complete and completely finished before the 48 CFR rule can begin. Those can happen in an overlapping pattern. So the key thing to look for here is that schedule updates on the actual rulemaking docket is what they call it for the various agencies is going to be updated in summer. So sometime between June and August, it's never really the same every year. The DoD, as well as all the other agencies, will update their docket of rules for what they've been working on. And what are the rules doing? The rules are going to be codifying what was written in DoD's strategic intent that was released at the end of last year. So if you think back to last year, really not a whole lot happened. We had a programmatic review at the Pentagon of the CUI or the CMMC program from March to about November. And then when that program review was done, they released CMMC 2.0 as the DoD's strategic intent. The rulemaking process will take that strategic intent and codify it to make it the actual regulation and then ultimately the actual clause that shows up in contracts. So if you are waiting for significant changes to show up in the rulemaking process for CMMC, you may be waiting for the wrong thing, because that's what all of the review was done for beforehand, that they already know what they're going to put in the rule because the review has been done. So keep that in mind, that they aren't going to be releasing major changes after the rule. The rules come after the major changes have already been decided. Okay, so something to consider on the track for the CMMC program itself, the CMMC ecosystem, if you will. The certification assessments for the Certified Third-Party Assessment Organization, the C3PAOs, the companies that will employ the assessors that actually show up to assess companies, those have started again. They were put on pause when CMMC 2.0 came out. There was some speculation that they weren't going to start for some time. They have started again, and recently, here at the beginning of February, the 6th C3PAO was actually officially certified. So that program is back underway. And we should see more C3PAOs certified, hopefully at an accelerating rate throughout the year. The thing to look for in the CMMC ecosystem is that in this interim period, while we're waiting for the rules to be done, the 32 and 48 CFR rules on the DFARS line, is the end of what they call the provisional program. So they've been developing their certifications, they've been developing their exams, they've been developing all of the official versions of the CMMC program, the assessor exams, everything that has to go into the actual ecosystem. So the big signal will be when they end the provisional program. So there won't be provisional assessors anymore. There will actually be certified assessors. The big signal for when that's occurring is when people actually are able to start taking their exams, which according to recent CMMC AB town halls should be within a few weeks to several weeks is when that process should start, definitely by summertime. So there's a few things that are still waiting in the wings for the provisional program to end and the official program to start that don't have anything to do with rulemaking. They have to do with how the program ecosystem is being run. One of those is what's known as the CAP, or the CMMC Assessment Process Guide. These are the phases and sequences, the actual steps that a assessment will go through: pre-assessment review, the actual assessment itself, any remediation periods, reporting, evidence collection. All of those types of things are going to be captured in this CAP guide, which we recently heard on the town hall from the AB. Should be released very soon, within a matter of days to weeks from the time of this recording here towards the end of February. One other thing to look for is the establishment of the CMMC Emass system, which is actually the system that the assessors and the C3POs will be interacting with for the collection of assessment information, uploading it, and then sending it to review, whatever that process looks like in the CAP. Emass is the tool that they'll be using that apparently has been in development for some time. People have seen it and it exists, but it has to actually be live for the official ecosystem to be able to use it. So there's a couple of milestones here that we're still looking for the CMMC official program period to begin. This is theoretically where the start of what is known as the incentive period would begin. The DoD, the CMMC AB, everybody's very eager to make sure that they don't wait until the rulemaking is done in a few to several months for people to start getting their assessments. So they're trying to figure out ways to incentivize companies to go after those assessments early, to be early adopters. The details of those incentives are not really solid as of this point, but you're probably going to see each of these four things happen in rapid succession as the provisional program ends. So something to consider in terms of Nist, right? So the Nist requirements are the requirements that are being assessed by the CMMC program, is the way to think of this relationship. So the requirements are driven by Nist and Nist documentation. CMMC is the name of DoD's program for assessing the implementation of those requirements by contractors. So none of the Nist documents really exist in a vacuum. They are not islands. They are informed by Nist's philosophy as it changes over the years. And early this year, they released SP 800-160 and SP 853A. These are not anything that is going to be prescribed or mentioned in a DFARS clause for cybersecurity, but they are relevant for your overall understanding of what's going to drive changes to 800-171 in the future. So later this year, we know that we're going to get revision 3 of 800-171, as well as the final publication of 800-172, the advanced set of control enhancements to 171 that constitute CMMC level 3. So the reason that it's important to know about and perhaps skim through 800-160 and 853A, in my opinion, is that the nature of 171 is not going to change fundamentally. It is probably going to be more 171-like, if you will. It's going to be more information assurance based, more security engineering based. They're going to lean into these concepts harder for developing assurance cases, how they break controls down, what assessments need to do, how the assessment procedures will be structured. Everything that you would see in 800-171 and 800-171A currently, you will probably see in spades in revision 3. We're not going to see a major sea change or a major pivot away from 171 as it exists right now when we move into revision 3. The sort of key takeaway, though, for revision 3 is that it's really derived from 853, the sort of big master catalog of Nist controls. There's like 1,100 of these controls in 853, and we've cut them down and derived them to get the 110 controls in 800-171. At a minimum, we know that there are going to be more controls in 800-171 Rev 3 because 853 has more controls in the moderate baseline than 853 Rev 4. So the fifth revision of 53 is bigger than the fourth revision. So when we update the third revision of 171, then it's going to naturally expand. In addition to that, remember that CMMC 2.0 cut 20 of the unique controls to CMMC when they shifted from 1.0 to 2.0. And DoD has expressed a lot of interest in collaborating with Nist to get as many of those added back in as possible. That's probably a longer analysis of what could or could not be included, but as a general takeaway, definitely anticipate that 800-171 Rev 3 will have more controls in it than 800-171 Rev 2. And then if you are a company that is going to need CMMC level 3, then look for the final publication of 800-172, which we've been waiting on now for some time. Okay, finally, an interesting note here are the other agencies and the CUI program. So the CUI program applies to all federal agencies, not just DoD. Everybody who is a defense contractor or has had to deal with DoD's version of assessing CUI requirements we're just lucky because we were able to do it first. However, the other agencies also have to come up with their own CUI programs, how they are going to interface with their contractors as they flow CUI into their supply chains. And DHS appears to be ready to publish their final CUI rule, which has been in development since 2017. So 800-171 is the minimum set of requirements for protecting CUI in non-federal organizations government-wide. So when DHS publishes their rule, they are going to point to, at a minimum, 800-171 as the set of controls, just like DoD has to. The thing that will be interesting to look for is, will DHS have any form of assessment requirements for their contractors holding their CUI? Remember, CMMC is the program name for DoD's program for assessing their contractors' implementation. It does not mean that other government agencies have to use CMMC. Does not mean that other government agencies have to do assessments at all, but they could. So it'll be very, very interesting to see when this comes out in April, May time of this year in 2022, whether or not there's going to be some sort of assessment program. Do they co-opt CMMC? Do they come up with their own assessment program that eclipses CMMC? Do they not do an assessment at all? Very, very interesting, and expect to see other agencies other than DoD and DHS like GSA, NASA, Department of Commerce, IRS. They will be in the same situation as we move through, but currently we know that the DHS rule should be out here right in the lead up to summertime. Okay, so if we sort of look at 2022 and we think back to 2021, much more is going to occur in this year compared to last year. If you were to have these same tracks for 2021, effectively nothing happened. 2022, by the time the holidays roll around, will look drastically different than 2021 did. And probably the ultimate final takeaway is that all of these things are trending towards not having significant changes in underlying requirements. We are crystallizing and solidifying overall policy towards 800-171 being a minimum baseline, adding controls to the minimum baseline, establishing and actually running the program for assessments for not only the DoD, but possibly for other federal agencies, as well as filling in the final missing piece of the overall federal CUI program. So lots of things that we've been waiting for quite some time are going to be finished, easily by the end of 2022. So if 2021 lulled you into the idea that things are slowing down or perhaps things are being abandoned, that is the wrong position to take. So look for some additional videos on each of these individual events coming out in the future, and then hopefully, especially after the summer update to rulemaking, we'll see if our predictions were correct and then release another video from there.